It's time for The Story Behind the Person, featuring lively, in-depth conversation with compelling guests from our community. And here is our host, Jonathan Van Bilsen.
Hello and welcome to this episode. My guest today is the Member of Provincial Parliament for Durham Region, Ms. Lindsey Park. We'll learn all about what life in politics has been like for a newcomer and what it means to be in the public eye. We'll also get a glimpse into the life of Lindsey herself, her challenges and her accomplishments. We'll be right back after these messages.
Top care with top stylists. Book your next hair appointment with Port Perry's award-winning hair salon, Rosario Greco Styles. The hair experience you deserve. Book today. Call 905-985-0099.
Welcome back. As I mentioned, my guest today is the Member of Provincial Parliament for Durham Region, Ms. Lindsey Park. Ms. Park, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
My pleasure. I wanted to talk a little bit about you, but before we do that, pandemic life in politics. I guess you didn't sign up for that when you were elected, right? It's been a bit of a change, to say the least. What do you think is the biggest issue that you faced during the pandemic?
Well, certainly life as an MPP totally changed. Your schedule most weeks included going to many events out in the community, of course, showing up to Queen's Park in person when it was sitting, doing lots of meetings in person in your office to learn of new issues your constituents were facing. And suddenly there were no community events. Right. And, you couldn't do in-person meetings very easily. And so, I don't even think I knew what Zoom was at the start of the pandemic. And suddenly, we were spending our entire day on this platform. And one of the things I really had to adapt to is I was so used to seeing people at those events, at those community events, and catching up with people and finding out the latest of what people were saying in response to what we were doing as a government. And so I had to find new ways to get feedback from my constituents. And so one of my initiatives during this to try and keep in touch was to start doing random just calls to constituents all across the riding to try and see what was their feedback, what was their response. If you can remember, decisions were changing by the hour, often by the day. And on Friday, the rules, the pandemic restrictions were sometimes in a completely different place than they were on Monday. Right. And so I found those calls very valuable. And a lot of people had a bit more time to chat with their MPP on the phone. So. Which
is something that normally you wouldn't have.
Exactly. So, normally it's hard to get people to speak to a politician on the phone, but during the pandemic, I was very warmly received and really enjoyed the calls.
Well, that's good, because maybe what we'll do is we'll put your cell phone number on the screen so people could call you. So let's talk a little bit about your background, where you grew up, how you grew up. Your mother was a nurse at St. Mike's. Your father was a professional hockey player, right? And where did he play?
He played in the World Hockey Association for the Indianapolis Racers. At the time, the World Hockey Association, WHA, was a competing league with the NHL. They were actually paying players a bit more. And,
oh, really? Okay.
And this was the discussion that was happening at the time. But Wayne Gretzky played in that league for a period of time. Gordie Howe, the Hull brothers.
Right.
It was a big part of my dad's life.
And what position did he play?
And he was a goaltender, as was I. I went on to play.
I saw that, and I thought that was interesting. They lived in Indianapolis, I assume, when he played there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Were you born there, or were you born here?
No, and so when he retired from playing hockey, they moved back to Canada, where both my parents were born and raised, and then in York Region we lived. That's where I was born and raised. But I was, as you mentioned, my mom was a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital, and so that's where I was born. Was at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto.
And I assume because, from a nursing background and a sports background, politics was not something that you would talk about regularly around the dinner table, right?
I was raised in a hockey family, and so we were more likely at the dinner table to to speak about who the Toronto Maple Leafs were playing on Saturday night for Hockey Night in Canada than to talk about politics.
Now, I met a number of years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting a few hockey greats. One of them was Ken Dryden. And I understand that that's quite significant in your family, right? Your nephew, I believe.
Yeah, so much to my father's chagrin, my brother is a Montreal Canadiens fan.
Right.
And of course, Ken Dryden, one of the famous goaltenders,
Of course.
For the Montreal Canadiens, who actually went on to become a politician as well.
Right, that's right.
But my nephew is named Dryden after Ken Dryden.
That's amazing. I could see where that would where your father would think different about that. So your high school years, you started your hockey career more or less while you were in high school, right? That's when you started playing aggressively. You played as a forward for a few months, and then you got the bug to be a goalie. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess it ran in my genes, or the interest anyways, was similar to my dad's. And there's no question, my father was very passionate about the sport. And so I think I picked up on that from a young age. I started playing relatively late by Canadian standards. I started playing when I was 11 years old. Okay. But was really grateful to have my father as a coach who helped me progress. And so I went on to play after playing hockey, minor hockey in Ontario. I got a scholarship away later on to play university athletics in the U.S.
You played in Durham too, right? So Durham West.
Yeah, I played part of that time for the Durham West Girls Hockey Association. If you remember the name. Famous star athlete from Durham Region, Jen Wakefield. Right. Jennifer Wakefield. I played on the same team as Jennifer. And a lot of great talented players have come out of the Durham West Girls Hockey Association and gone on to play for Team Canada like Jen.
And then your dad went on to coach hockey, or goalie, I guess, being goalie as a coach?
Yeah, later on after he retired from playing sport, as you know, when people retire from playing professional hockey, they're not really retirement age. Right. They're usually, even mid-career. Right. And many then question what to do after. He was very entrepreneurial, started his own business, coaching young athletes, specifically goalies. And at the time, there was a real demand for that coaching, particularly as hockey was picking up in the United States. Many young families looked for coaching from Canada, and so many would even send their kids to Canada for the summer to get hockey coaching, and in this case goaltending coaching from my dad.
So you obviously benefited from that greatly.
I spent a lot of time there. Yeah.
And you took kinesiology at U of T?
Yeah, so I was there and at Wayne State University because I transferred between the schools, played hockey at both.
Wayne State is?
In downtown Detroit.
That's where I'd want to be.
Yeah, so that was an eye-opening place to live for sure, but got to play the highest level you can as a university athlete and a young woman playing the game. And at the end of my university time, when many of my friends were going on and making the decision whether they were going to go train for Team Canada full time. Right. And I decided, you can tell me later, Jonathan, whether you think I made the right decision, but I decided to move back to Canada and go to law school, but really enjoyed my time and the privilege to get to play the highest level I could in university.
Yeah, I can't make the comment because I've never seen you play hockey. So, but you wanted to be a teacher too, somewhere in there, right? That was sort of part of
my undergraduate degree was very much geared towards being a teacher, and I still really enjoy teaching, even if it's in an informal way, and mentoring young people that are interested in law or in politics, and I really enjoy that aspect of even being a member of provincial parliament. I enjoyed going to classrooms and speaking to young students, and honestly the best questions come from like 7-8-year-old.
Is that right? I can imagine kids, it would be, because it's unfiltered, right? Yeah. Which is good. So I know that the US is quite a ways behind Canada with recycling and environmental concerns. So you picked up the ball there and did something while you were in university, right?
Yeah, it was a big part of my story looking back in my university time. And then when I went on to law school, I was always part of the campus environmental groups. So when I was at Wayne State University playing hockey, when the season ended, I got involved with the environmental group, and one of the things we did, other than creating garden beds on campus, that sort of thing. I also saw a real lack of just recycling programs on the campus. And I was used to, I guess, growing up in Ontario, that it was second nature. You took your recycling to the curb, it got picked up, and there was just no similar thing in the United States and specifically where I was in downtown Detroit. And so we started a recycling program on campus while I was there. So little things, but just something I really noticed as a girl from Ontario going to Michigan for a few years.
And it caught on, did it?
It did, yeah. It'd be interesting to go back and see the status of it now. But that was an important part of my journey.
And you, when you went into law, environmental law was a big part of your portfolio, right?
Yeah, I had the privilege when I was in law school to get to spend some time with academics who were in the space of environmental law and really start to consider, what are the laws in place in our country that protect the environment and make sure it's going to be there for our kids and for the next generation. And I think that was part of. I can remember, Jonathan, in the first year of law school, a professor standing at the front of the room and saying, well, there's two ways to change the laws in our country. You can either be a lawyer and take a case to the Supreme Court, or you can be involved in politics and involved in changing the laws every day. And I think that's where my interest in public policy and how the laws change and come to be started. And part of that was even learning that history and the possibility going forward of those laws that protect the environment.
And I've got a note here that you did volunteer quite a bit, right? So as a young person, looking for direction, I suppose, or where the future is, how did you decide which party to support, to go with, to volunteer for, so forth? Was it based on the person? Was it based on the politics?
I think all politics is personal. We often get involved because we know someone else involved, or we get connected with someone that's involved in it. My first volunteer experience was with Peter Kent, the Member of Parliament for Thornhill. And so I volunteered, showed up, and later actually had the chance to work for Peter when he was Minister of the Environment. And what really stood out to me about Peter was he was an example for me of ethics and integrity in politics. And when I was working for Peter, I really saw we needed more of that in the political system. And I would say, going full circle, I stand by that, assessment. It's sometimes lacking ethics and integrity, and the system isn't necessarily built around those values, our political institutions.
And Peter Kent is an amazing person. I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'd like to learn more about the political side of Lindsey Park. So we'll be back right after these messages.
It's about your brand, and at PP Print, we can help create promotional products and apparel that will put you above your competition. PP Print, more than just print.
At Voss, your independent grocer, it's all about hometown living and shopping. Owned and operated by Port Perry's own Terry and Christine Voss, the independent grocer carries many local items to support our town and its residents.
Welcome back. My guest today is the Member of Provincial Parliament for Durham, Ms. Lindsey Park. Lindsey, welcome back. So there was a lot of interesting information about you. Now I wanted to talk about the political element because that's where I certainly know you from, as do many people who are watching. You started to volunteer. Well,
it was the first time I volunteered was a federal election campaign. I believe it was 2011, and so Stephen Harper was running for re-election as Prime Minister and won re-election in 2011, I thought as Prime Minister, Stephen Harper put forward a lot principled leadership at a time when the country needed it. And but within the government, as I said, I worked for Peter Kent when he was Minister of the Environment.
Right.
And it was really working for Peter that I got a heart for public service in this way and saw the difference you could make.
Right.
And so, yeah, I guess over time I stayed in touch with those friends I had met along the way and in politics. And as I say, all politics is personal, and it becomes those people you meet along the way that you stay in touch with that really shape your path. And then fast forward, it was 2018 in the lead up to the provincial election. I really felt we needed a change at the provincial level, and that the Progressive Conservatives could provide that best alternative to the Kathleen Wynne government. And so I decided it was important enough that we saw a change that I wanted to put my name forward and be a part of that.
Right. Now, you were practicing law at the time in Ottawa, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I was practicing law from Durham Region, but connected to an Ottawa law firm. And so I live in Oshawa, and that's been my home for the last number of years.
A lot of you were practicing was construction.
Estate litigation, which is often people go to a lawyer when there's a dispute after one of their family members has passed away, a dispute over their assets. So that was one area of law. And I did some power of attorney litigation when people are being taken advantage of. Right. And then construction litigation when there's big delays or disputes around big construction projects.
So I find it interesting that as a lawyer you have to really do your homework and know everything that's going on before you handle a case or present a case. In politics, sometimes you listen to politicians speaking and it's almost like they're just shooting from the hip.
I think that's one of my big takeaways, and something I noticed very early on in elected life. I was used to having to prepare to show up to court and present facts and evidence to support those facts. And I found in politics, and many involved will perhaps laugh at this comment because they know it's true, but there's no similar level of commitment to facts and evidence, particularly in the legislature or the House of Commons, or even in sometimes the coverage around it and the interviews that are done around it. And I think that's a challenge we have with our political institutions, and that is the very thing that leads to a breakdown in trust in government. Is when people can't trust that they're getting the facts from their leaders. So I think we have some work to do in that area. I don't think the answers are easy, but the position I've taken is, every day I'm on the job, I'm going to make sure if it's going to come out of my mouth, if I'm going to write it in a letter to a constituent, that it's backed up by facts and evidence, or I'm not going to say it. And so that was my commitment, and I think going forward, I just see more than ever we need people involved that are smart and that are ethical if we're going to change that.
I think politics a number of years ago, was at a totally different level. A politician was sort of above everyone else. That has changed dramatically through social media and such things, because now whatever you say, it's going to be easy to catch if you're saying something incorrect.
Well, it's everyone's got a different style of politics. We all bring our background and our personalities to it. I think it was, I'll just say this, when I joined the Progressive Conservative Party at the provincial level, I never could have imagined the leadership of the party putting out a false statement about me a week before my wedding. They say a week is a lifetime in politics. It really was. I went from probably one of the worst moments of my life to the best moment of my life in a week.
Congratulations on your wedding too.
Thank you. But all that to say, like, there was a serious breakdown in trust between me and the leadership of the party. That doesn't happen overnight.
Of course.
Certainly the false statement put out about me was the final straw.
Right.
But I will say, I lost confidence in the current leadership of the PC party.
Right.
Particularly during the pandemic.
Do you notice a big difference running or being in as an independent?
I'm actually thankful for this time as an independent. I've gotten a very interesting view of the legislature.
Okay.
No one tells you how to vote.
Right.
The only people telling me how to vote are my constituents,
Right.
in contrast to when you're a member of a party. So I have to do all my own research on every bill that's presented
Right.
and decide how I'm going to vote. I made the decision when I resigned from the Progressive Conservative Caucus to become an independent. I wanted to be very active. I
Right.
wanted to show up for votes. I wanted to be there asking questions in question period, and put forward my own, private members' bills during my time as an independent. I will say sometimes, Jonathan, I just sit back. I'm in a different seat in the legislature. I sit back and just observe what's going on in question period. Right. And it's interesting the questions different people choose to ask on a given day. But I will say this, I think great ideas come from all parties.
Right.
And sometimes I think it would benefit the political process if people could, remove the fact that the idea is coming from someone on a different side of things than
Right.
themselves or a member of a different political party, and come together for the benefit of the people of Ontario who are of all different backgrounds,
Right.
of all different stripes.
Of course.
And when you're elected, you're elected to serve everyone.
Well, you've certainly done a lot of things in the short time that you've been involved. The first one I remember was the Golden Girls Act, which is very near and dear to the people of Port Perry. What exactly was that?
Yeah, so that bill was really to fight discrimination against seniors, particularly in seniors housing. The story goes, there was a group of senior ladies in Port Perry, known as the Golden Girls of Port Perry, who decided they were all living independently. They decided to move in together, buy a heritage home in downtown Port Perry and renovate it. And they ran into significant hurdles
Right.
From the township saying, that they couldn't live together. They weren't related, so they couldn't live together in that way.
Right.
And so the bill sought to clarify in provincial legislation that you cannot discriminate against unrelated people who want to live together.
Right. So you also pushed very hard to include nuclear energy in changes in the environmental laws and so forth. How did that work?
Yeah, so obviously we have a great heritage of leadership in the province of Ontario in the nuclear energy field, and over 20% of Ontario's power. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people don't know that comes from nuclear energy.
20%.
One of the reasons why we have one of the cleanest electricity grids in the world. And so my motion that I put forward in the legislature was to call on the government to include nuclear energy in their planning, particularly around energy policy, fighting climate change, and the environment. And so I'm really pleased, particularly the discussion was around the next generation of nuclear technology as we plan and look forward. And small modular reactors are the latest technology in the nuclear space that there's a lot of potential around. Anyways, since that time, the government has come out and approved of Ontario Power Generation moving forward with planning for small modular reactors, and there's great potential. They've announced they're planning to build the first on-grid small modular reactor at the Darlington site.
You recently put forth a loneliness bill, I believe it's referred to. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that stems from seniors during the pandemic, is that right?
I think that's part of it. I mentioned the phone calls I was doing during the pandemic to lots of different constituents, and a common thread of that was individuals, not only seniors, but many of them seniors who felt alone.
Right.
If you had a small family or if you have no family alive, you didn't necessarily have that natural support in such a tough time. But we saw this, Jonathan, even before the pandemic. There was actually a report tabled by Dr. David Williams, whose name became very prominent during the pandemic as the Chief Medical Officer for Ontario, saying that loneliness and social isolation is a serious public health issue. And if you think back, compared to previous generations, we have people spending more time on screens, volunteering less time in the community, and spending less time with friends and family.
Right.
And there's no question that has a serious impact on not only our productivity, but our health and our well-being. And so it's that status of things before the pandemic, as well as I think it became real for almost everyone during the pandemic. Naturally, with the restrictions that were coming in, you were almost forced into social isolation. I decided it's time. Like, we need a serious strategy around this. And I don't think it's a government-only strategy, Jonathan.
Right.
But I think the government has a leadership role to play. And so this motion was calling on the government to develop a strategy to reduce loneliness and social isolation.
It's an amazing idea. Unfortunately, our time is up. We could talk about this for a long, long time because there's so many other things that you have done that are wonderful. I want to wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Again, congratulations on your marriage and your future. And I really look forward to hearing more about Lindsey Park. Thank you so much for joining us today. My guest next month will be Dr. Steve Russell, who heads up the new Oak Ridges Hospice in Port Perry. We'll learn all about the wonderful things this organization has done for the community. I also wanted to mention that one of the doctors in Port Perry, Kim Ferguson, has initiated a challenge to raise $10,000 in aid of the hospice. To signify her commitment, once she reaches her goal, Dr. Kim, who I might add has a fear of heights, will actually attempt skydiving. I guess attempt is not really the right word. Thank you all for watching. Please join us every month to find out the story behind the person right here on Rogers TV.